AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection presents Let's Talk Salud, Dinero y Amor, an interactive conversation on issues relevant to Hispanic Latinos. Do interact with us by sharing your comments. Let's begin. Good morning. Good morning. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. The topic or the show actually is Let's Talk Salud, Dinero y Amor. Let's Talk Salud, Dinero y Amor. We have a very special show today, and we have a special guest with us. Actually, the name of the show is Elections, the Latino Vote in Arizona. Elections, the Latino Vote in Arizona. And before I introduce my guest, let me allow me to read. Actually, let me not wait. Let me show you our guest today, and that is Joseph Garcia. Joseph Garcia, thank you for joining. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, David. How are you?
Pretty good. I didn't want to have you waiting in the waiting room there, so. This is a very important topic, and I am going to read a short paragraph that I wrote for this show. I think it's important to kind of give it some context to the show. And it says, 2020 is an election year. Arizona just had its primary this month, and in November, the country will have its general election, which includes, of course, the presidential election. It is very likely that from time to time, we find ourselves complaining and criticizing the way our democracy, our government operates. Well, the exercise of voting gives us ample opportunities to debate over issues and to elect those whom we feel represent what's important to us. For many years, we have heard about the sleeping giant, referring to the Latino voter. Today, we will share good information about the Latino vote in Arizona. Okay, so that's a little introduction for you. And Joseph, we just had our primary elections here in Arizona. What can you tell us about what did you see in this primary election?
Well, primaries are kind of a funny thing. When I was at ASU Morrison Institute, we did a report called Arizona Voter Crisis, and we looked at participation among voters. And primaries, obviously, is one of the elections that many people skip, many people avoid. The problem with that is that in many cases, the primary is the de facto election because there is no legitimate challenge, or sometimes cases no challenge at all come November, and are partisan party elections. So if you have a very strong Republican district, legislative district, or strong Democratic district, those candidates, whoever rises out of the primary and goes to the generals, pretty much automatically will win in November. So sometimes the primary is the election. But I don't think there were any great surprises in the primary. There were a few, really good battles, but we certainly, there were some high-profile races, including the ones with Sheriff Joe Arpaio, for instance, and there were a few legislative races. But I don't think there were any surprising upsets.
You have some data about the primary voter. Would you mind going over that data? I mean, we already exceeded 7 million people in Arizona. I think we just did that not so long ago. And you have some data about who's registered and who voted. And then even Latino. Would you mind reviewing some of that data with us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you look at the number of registered voters, we're approaching 4 million registered voters here in Arizona. And you look at the ballots that were cast, 1.3 million votes cast, and that's a lot. There were more than a million, so everybody was happy, and a voter turnout of 33%, a little bit more than that. But again, that is the percent of registered voters who turned out in the primary. So you can say, a third of the registered voters voted in the primary, but that also means that 2/3 of the registered voters did not.
Is that typical? Is that really bad, or is that across the board, across the country, what we see, a third voting, here and there?
Yeah, actually, that's actually pretty good for a primary. Oftentimes, primaries can get in the 20s.
Mm,
It's not unusual
wow.
for that. It's just that because this is a presidential election year, and in presidential election years, people vote more often, or
Mm.
including in primaries and certainly in the general. So people show up more when there's a presidential race.
But we definitely can expect these numbers to increase come November for the general, correct?
Correct, definitely.
Yeah. And let me see. So let me show another slide here. So you have some data about registered voters, and then in 2020 and 2016. Can you go over those numbers with us?
Yeah, so you can see the growth that we've had since the 2016 election, general election. We've had a 400,000 increase in the number of registered voters. So, the voter rolls in Arizona have increased, and, there's no doubt about that. But I think you need to understand and put that in context. What does that mean? Because
Hmm.
2016, 4 years ago, what has happened? And I think that the next slide will show what we're talking about.
Let me do that. Hmm.
Okay, so we've got since January 2020, we've had more than 62,000 new registered voters. That's since January, and of course we have the total, as we noted, just under 4 million registered voters. So why? The question is why? Why are we getting these new voters?
Hmm.
And the answer, if you go to the next slide, is there's a couple of key reasons. One is that it's growth. It's Arizona population growth. Maricopa County ranked number one in the U.S. for growth once again. I think it's the third straight year. Arizona as a state is among the top 5 in growth, I believe, but
Mm.
it's because of Maricopa County. People are moving into Maricopa County in droves. And
Hmm.
when they come, they bring their politics with them, and many of them register to vote. And that's why we see the increase.
Right.
So, but you look at the increase of population, Arizona's population, and then the increase since 2016 by more than 335,000 people. You can see, of course, we'd have an increase in number of registered voters. So I don't know. It isn't a matter of people that are suddenly registering to voting. We have this huge population growth that is responsible for half of that equation. But there's another half that we need to talk about, and that's why we're here. Go ahead, the next slide.
Yeah, so let me ask you something
Yeah,
here, and I'll move to the next slide. So, are you saying that the increase is not necessarily of new of people that just registered, but that it could be also those that moved to our state that were already registered? Did I
yeah,
get that right?
it's the combination of there's 3 elements there. The combination, and we'll talk about 2 of them certainly, but the combination of new people moving in, and new people moving in, many of them are voters, and then they register to vote because you register to vote when you change your driver's license.
Mm.
So you can change right then you register to vote if you want at a click of a button. So it's very easy to register in Arizona. So if you move here, you get a new driver's license, boom, you're a registered voter. So a lot of
Got it.
those are new voters because they're new residents.
Mm.
Uh, Obviously some people, because people are registering to vote that have lived here a long time, but that isn't. That's only, you need to look at it in context. The other part is what I call the Latino maturation growth, and
Yeah.
that is because Latinos are progressing. If you look
Yeah.
at this picture, this kind of shows what I'm talking about a little bit.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
the
Right.
faces, and this is just a screenshot,
Hmm.
obviously, but you can see this kind of pictures on what Latinos look like, if you will. The end of the gentleman and the mother on the other side of the
Right.
crowd shot. I mean, they're older Latinos. They may vote, but they may not.
Right,
And
right.
part of the reason may be that, he or she, one or both, possibly could be undocumented and here,
Mm,
weren't born
mm.
in the United States, therefore are not eligible to vote. Then
And
you look at the,
Joseph, let me
yeah,
interact just for a second. I look at my family. My parents were born in Mexico. Then they had several of my siblings born in this country. Others were born in Mexico. I believe a good 90% of my siblings, including my parents, vote. And then now I have my own children, and I have three of them, and all three vote. Actually, my 18-year-old just voted for his first time this year. So I think it's kind of like a process, of a kind of like voting becoming a tradition. So it's not like it's an automatic thing. It's going to be a miraculous thing. It seems to be more of a family thing. Do you agree with that?
yeah, very much so. It is it's institutionalized as an expectation in a family,
Mm,
much like education. If
right,
your parents go to college, there's an 80% chance that you're going to go to college. But
right.
let's say your parents didn't go to college, or maybe they didn't even finish high school. Well,
Hmm.
then there's just as much chance that you're not going to go to college, or perhaps you don't finish high school. So it's that expectation, that family institutional expectation.
Right.
But the Latino voters, again, it comes down to of if you go back to that picture real quick, I just want to talk a little bit more about that family. So
Hmm.
anyway, so you look at that family. So as I said, one of the older adults may or may not be eligible to vote for the reasons we stated, and then you look at the two younger adults. One of them possibly, depends on their age, have just turned 18. So maybe they're
Mm,
voting in the first election. One of them, so it may be their first time they're eligible to vote. And then you look at the young children, they're not eligible to vote, of course. And
right.
then you have the old dreamer element, that's kind of the in between, brought here as a young child, still not eligible to vote, even though they've lived here almost all their lives. So,
Right.
it kind of depends on where people are in that progression, on what will be, believe me, it's someday the whole pathway to citizenship for all people in this nation. So, it will happen, but it's not going to happen this year.
There in this country, we use the term battle state, and you're saying that Maricopa is a battle country. Sorry, county. Can you just elaborate just briefly one more time on that battle state? And I believe Arizona is a battle state. It's a state that it's not clear who's going to win, right? And then, but now you say that Maricopa County is a battle county, correct?
Yeah, and I think I have a slide on that too. But it's that whole idea that if you look at the state's population, people call this the state of Maricopa,
Mm,
largely because this is where everybody lives, and this is the state capital, and that's very rare in states. Most times, most states have their state capital uh, elsewhere other than the largest city. So that
mm-hmm,
way it gives the state a state presence. Well, we
right,
don't. We have the state capital here, and all the growth is here, and all the people are here.
right.
Yeah,
Now,
there's some in Pima County, some in Coconino County, but largely, rural Arizona. But you look at it, it's largely Maricopa is where the growth is, and where the power is, and where the people are.
got it. There's another point, and I know that I heard you present at the Hispanic Leadership Institute. Then we had you, and by the way, we have thank you, Yvette Peña. She's saying voting in Latino multi-generational households. Let's make this a thing, part of every Latino family. Couldn't agree with you more, Yvette. Thank you so much for your comment. And by the way, if anybody's joining live, if you want to give us your comments or share a question or what have you, by all means, do it. Now, in the times that I've heard you talk, you seem to put this idea of the sleeping giant, that Latinos are going to be making a huge difference. I almost got surprised at how I guess I don't know if I want to use the word cold. You looked at that concept of the Latinos making the huge difference, but your perception is more based on data. So, and then we have the so-called electoral college, right? We don't go by popular vote. So doesn't that also make Latinos impact a little more difficult, or maybe the expectation is a little too high? Can you shed some light on that?
Sure. Let's move forward through the slides because I think I have some slides that address those very questions.
Of course.
Uh, so yeah, this one. First of all, I think what you're talking about as far as the Latinos, it's largely aspirational that
Mm,
Latinos are going to get out to vote. The reality is the numbers don't show that.
mm,
And part of it has been because of, if you look at the data, Latinos are a very young population still.
mm.
So you look at the median age for Latinos, it's 25 in Arizona, whereas for non-Latino whites, it's 44. So
Wow.
so the median, half is older, half is younger. So many Latinos weren't old enough to vote. So
Mm.
even if we're excited and we want to get the Latinos to vote for in past years, there weren't enough Latinos who were even eligible to vote by the age. So you weren't going to get those numbers.
I see.
And
I
there's
see.
nothing wrong with being inspirational, aspirational, and wanting it to happen. But there was a actual number physical barrier there because
Mm.
unless you turn 18 and a U.S. citizen, you cannot vote. So if you go to
So,
the next, yeah,
so we could have millions and millions, but if they're too young to vote, then
exactly.
at least at that juncture, it's not going to make a big difference until they become of age to vote. Correct?
Precisely.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So you go to the next slide. This very question that you've asked, I've been asked countless times. Having been involved in politics for many years, including at Morrison Institute, including working at the Arizona Republic as a reporter and an editor. And the question I always get asked is, when are Latinos going to flex their muscle at the ballot box?
Mm.
And the Washington Post did a very good story in framing Latino voting in Arizona, and in an article they wrote at the end of July, and I was quoted in it, and so was my colleague Lydia Guzman at
Hmm.
CPLC, talking
Right.
about the election. And every election I get asked that question, but again, it was the numbers that we're talking about. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the numbers weren't there.
Right.
It wasn't going to happen. The numbers are there now, but
Okay.
there's still the challenge. If you go to the next slide there, um, here's the deal. You have all these young Latinos who have come into age. That's the maturation process I was talking about.
Hmm.
Can you get them to register to vote, and can you get them to vote? Now,
Okay.
traditionally, there's been three buckets of people who are very difficult to get them to vote. That is young people. Young people largely don't vote. Uh, poor people. Poor people largely don't vote. And people with, let's call it more of a limited education. Perhaps they didn't go to college, and perhaps they didn't finish high school. Uh, they largely don't vote.
Hmm.
Well, Latinos fall into all three of those buckets.
I
So
see.
even remove the cultural ethnicity, whatever. We're talking about three buckets of very difficult to get these people to vote, and Latinos fall in all three.
Hmm.
Um, but so the idea is to change the culture to get people to register and to get them to vote.
Right.
It's a two-part process. You can be registered to vote and you don't vote, you didn't do anything. You
Hmm.
have to vote. So if you go back to that last slide, the one we were looking at, the other point was talking about Maricopa County. And yeah, the next one, Maricopa County shows, is the county to win. And
Let me see.
go.
Is that
Oh, one more. Oh,
so? It's farther back, right?
right there, right there. No, no, one more, one more. No, forward, forward. No, forward. You're going backwards.
Okay.
You got a clicky finger there. What? Stop. Go, go back one. One. We'll keep going back. Go back. Okay, go forward from that one. Okay, regardless, the point
Yeah.
is that if you win Maricopa County, you will win Arizona, and if
Mm,
you win Arizona, the Latinos, if they show up in the force that they can, then obviously Arizona being a battleground state now in the election, Latinos could make the big difference when it comes to the outcome in the general election. And the presidential side, and of course, everybody on that ticket, on that ballot below would benefit,
hmm
whoever Latinos go for. So, people forget that Donald Trump won in Arizona 4 years ago by only 3.5 percentage points.
mm,
That's nothing. If the Democratic Party had put money and faith in Arizona, Arizona very well could have gone against Donald Trump. This state was very much a John McCain state too,
mm.
and that played into it obviously. But I mean that they understand that Arizona is a battleground state. You're seeing all the commercials now. You're hearing all the ads. You're getting
Right.
the ads in the mail. It's going to be even more so as we move forward towards November, because Arizona is a key state. And,
But let me go back. So you said three groups typically, independently of ethnicity, right? Three
yeah,
groups you typically don't vote. Can you repeat that again? It's young people tend not to vote,
correct.
and then poor
Poor
people or
people,
limited income,
yeah,
and then with limited education.
right. And
And you said,
Latinos are disproportionately live in poverty
mm,
um, in Arizona and elsewhere. And part of that is based on limited education, because that
mm,
limits your opportunity. And if you're limited opportunity because you have limited education, then obviously you're also limited in wealth.
mm,
So I mean, it's all interrelated there. So it's a
right.
matter of changing that dynamic. Now
Mm,
you can't do anything about the young part. That only happens kind of naturally. But
mhm,
there's the opportunity also, because this is a different generation. And if you get this generation to register to vote and to vote, if you vote at 18, you're going to keep voting the rest of your life. If
right,
you
right.
don't vote at 18 and then you don't vote at 20 and then you don't vote at 25, well, guess what? You're probably not going to vote. So it's that idea of making that connection of how important it is to vote, and get it instilled, like you say, when you raise children, you're in your 20s, start raising your family. If the first words that we can learn are education as
hmm
little children,
hmm
and say college, maybe that's the
mm,
first word we learn is college, and maybe the second word we learn is voting. If we
mm.
can start instilling these terms and expectations very very early on in our youth, and then the expectation is there as we grow older, different results, positive outcomes are the result.
So let me get this point. Let me get you to address this point once again, Joseph, because I think it's very important. Again, if our country used the system of popular vote, then the impact of a certain ethnicity group would be seen, I guess, faster, quicker, more evidently, if you will. But this is the electoral college. So even if Latinos go out to vote, how is that going to show up, the impact? Is that gonna be more like on a state by state basis, where a state that is a battleground, then that Latino vote could turn it one way or the other? Is that accurate?
Yeah, it depends on the state. I mean, here in Arizona, uh, you're talking about Latino youth. They're almost all U.S. citizens,
Hmm.
but the same cannot be said necessarily for their parents. One or
Right.
both may not be a U.S. citizen.
Hmm.
But the large number of Latino youth, I mean, they almost all are. And Arizona is a different state that way. Arizona is expected to become a minority majority state by 2030.
Mm.
And as we know, in our public schools, our K through 12, there are already more Latino kids than there are non-Latino white kids. So that's what our schools are. So we see where the future is, our future workforce, future leadership, future voters are there. Other states, however, are not as Latino, if you will, and they may be agricultural states. They're very much red states, very conservative, and many of the Latinos that are moving there don't have a high enough numbers, and those who are old enough may not be U.S. citizens. Perhaps they're migrant workers. They work in agriculture and so forth, and they can't have that impact that we have here in Arizona. So that only emphasizes or underscores the importance of Arizona as a battleground state, because the reality is that Latinos can make the big difference here in Arizona because the numbers are there, the eligible voters are there. It can very much happen here first. Now, it will happen the rest of the country. Other states go to the minority majority status about 2045, but that's still way in the future. But Arizona can be a player today, this election, and all future elections when it comes to having an impact on the national scale. And as well, of course, perhaps here and locally in the state legislature, which very well, one or both chambers could turn blue. And I think we have a slide on that one too.
Let me just ask another question, then we'll move through the slides. You said that you had worked for the Morrison Institute. You were a reporter. Now you work for Chicanos por la Causa. So do you think that the aspirational element within the Latino community, that the Latino community is going to make the difference, is that not reconciled with the data and the elements that you just covered in this presentation? Do they know, and are we just focusing on one area, not on the other? What is your assessment of those organizations and people who are involved in this process is in the Hispanic Latino community?
Well, I mean, much work needs to be done when it comes to registering voters, period. It goes beyond the Latino community. The Arizona's voter crisis report that we did, showed that, it was just, almost half of eligible voters across the United States weren't voting, period. And young people, half of them weren't even registering to vote. So which takes them out of the equation totally if you're not even registered to vote. So that's why we called it a crisis, because everyone focuses on the number of registered voters and the turnout among registered voters. Let's talk about eligible voters. Not enough of us are voting, period, and Latinos especially. So it doesn't mean that Latinos aren't engaged. I mean, everyone, it's the Instagrams, Snapchat, Twitter, texting, all this stuff. People are communicating, but the only one that really matters, if you really want to have a voice, is to vote. Now, discussion is good, and that's important, because that keeps us informed on the issues and understanding where everyone is, and you get to express yourself. But voting is the most clear, precise expression that you can have, and it has impact. The results. For too long, and we've heard politicians say it, especially that Latinos don't show up to vote. Why would I go after a Latino vote? And I think that is changing. There's an understanding that perhaps this new generation is different, but that doesn't mean we don't have to register to vote. And I'll tell you where there's another wealth of potential voters are on older Latinos who haven't voted or haven't registered. If we can get them to register and vote, they're dependable, because when you get a certain age, you start becoming a little more consistent. You're not as enthralled with the latest new and shiny object. So if you're older, you start understanding the issues more, and you act accordingly. So we're going to be very much at Chicanos por la Causa involved in voter registration and get out the vote. And we have some good plans. We have we've just started the 501c4, which is an advocacy nonprofit side of Chicanos por la Causa, which is going to allow us to be more political and more advocate and be involved more in elections. And we're also going to be involved in more of voter education, voter registration, and get out the vote. But we can talk about that. You got the slide up on the battleground state that we were talking about. And I think that shows that there's the challenge. Yes, it's wonderful because you got opportunity that a quarter of the eligible voters in Arizona are Latino. But if you look at the registration, only about 17% of registered voters are Latino. So, the numbers are there, but they're not registered. And then
Hmm.
less than half of eligible voters cast a ballot in 2016. And then you look at the who are the Latino registered voters? Well, more than half of them are the young people.
Right.
So that's good in that you want youth to be engaged. It's bad in that they're not casting the ballot.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So
Right.
it's the two-part process. If you go to the next slide there, um, this is what's at stake now is control of the Arizona legislature. Right now, the Arizona House, the Republicans control the House by 2 seats, and then the Senate by 4 seats. So the Senate's going to be harder to change and obtain because every district elects just one senator, every legislative district. But every district in the legislature elects 2 members from the House, every district. So you can see that it's quite conceivable. In fact, most people, political observers, believe it's already almost said and done that the House is going to turn blue or
Mm.
Democrat when it comes, past November. The Senate, we'll see. The Senate, even if it narrows the gap by say 2 seats or so, that allows opportunity for more alliances and negotiations between the 2 sides, Democrats and Republicans. So, one house, the House could be blue and the Senate could be still red or purplish if you want, but mostly red. So it's going to be interesting. But that's what's at stake is that the state politics, which has everything to do with education, budgeting for education, and many of the social programs, and all these things that affect us more. We are more affected by the state legislature than we are on the national side. Yeah, and they both have a role. Um, this here kind of talks about what I was talking about, the CPLC Action Fund, the C4, which we started, which is going to be very much involved in advocacy, and not just in the election side. We're going to be involved very much in lobbying after the election. We're going to be very much involved in community organizing, getting the community, empowering them to have a say on issues after the election. To get in
Right.
touch with their congressman or their state legislator or city council person. And they're going to be able to do all this on our apparatus to be on our website. We'll say, hey, this is an important issue. We'd like you to join us. They're going to be able to join us in that voice. So we are empowering the community. So when I say it's a 2-part process of registering to vote and voting, it's actually democracy is actually a 3rd part, and that is execution and follow through. So yes, you voted, and that means that you have a voice beyond November. That means you have a voice going forward to the person that you elected or the person that is the head of your district or congressional district or legislative district or city council district, and you have that voice to tell them how you feel and what you want them to do. So it's actually a 3-part process. So we're very excited. This is a brand new thing that we're doing here at CPLC. I was brought on to help move that forward as executive director. And we already played a role somewhat in the primary in that we were involved with 7 key races. And, we're going to be adding more in the general election, obviously, but it's all done strategically. We're going to be, it makes no sense to give money to a race that is pretty much decided, because then we're just throwing money on top of something. So you want to have an impact on races that are still in play, especially with limited number of money that we have. Certainly people are welcome to donate. We appreciate that.
So a quick question, Joseph. So is this action fund, you have the 501c4 and AARP is a 501c4 as well, but we're still nonpartisan.
Yes.
Can you explain that element in the case of Chicanos?
Yeah, for nonpartisan,
causa.
for us, it's very rare. And I'm not going to go into the details, but we have supported candidates who are Republican and candidates who are Democrat. And we've supported, there's some independents who, as well. As for us, it's who aligns best with CPLC's mission, or our pillars, as we call them. And that's who does best for education, who does best for health and human services, who does best for immigration issues, who does best for in financial enterprise and empowerment, who does best for housing, affordable housing. Whoever
Right.
aligns best with these key issues, we're going to support them and push them and help them achieve things. And those who aren't aligned, we're going to do our best to kind of bring them into line to help with these issues. Because all these core issues for Latinos are everything. It makes a difference. And what we need to work on is not just this generation, but future generations. So it becomes generational wealth. So it's not a cycle of poverty and missed opportunity. And that's why we're becoming so involved now. At our C3, 501c3 at CPLC, we deal with all kinds of problems largely. We need to work on the front end of pub policy. So if you get good policy, you reduce the number of problems on the tail end. And that's what we're looking to do.
Got it. I believe we've covered most of the information you sent to me, and we agreed to cover. Before I ask you to do kind of a wrap up, specifically again in setting the expectations of the Latino community based on data. Obviously, the aspirational is part of it. It has to be there because I believe it's a motivator. But then setting the expectation based on data and facts. Before I ask you to do that, Joseph, I just want to show those who are joining the Facebook Live and who will watch the video later on. This is a slide. The AARP, we also get involved in the what we call voter engagement. Helping, motivating people to register to vote, motivating them to vote, and then obviously producing voter guides so that people know where candidates stand on the issues of AARP as well. So we will be using hashtag ProtectVoters50+, and our website at aarp.org /election 2020. In Spanish, aarp.org/elecciones 2020, for you to know that we're there. We're going to be involved in this process, educating and encouraging to vote. And so, Joseph, help us in conclusion. I think unless you have something else that we haven't covered that you would like to cover, I would like to ask you to kind of do a summary of this show, and particularly emphasizing the Latino expectation, both from the element of aspiration, but also founded on data and facts.
Well, I think we can only raise the expectation if we increase the participation, and that is so key. But to increase the participation, again, you have to increase the engagement, and Latinos have to become more engaged. If you went to our website of our C4, our advocacy nonprofit, CPLCactionfund.org, you can actually click on the button and register right there. There's a button to register. In future weeks, we're going to be sharing a video which is going to get more people involved on how you can register your friends and family, especially a time of COVID right now. I mean, nobody wants to, stand out in the heat with a booth outside of a shopping center, register 1 or 2 or 3 people and call it a success, because it's not. And plus, many people don't want to give their personal information to a stranger. So we're going to rely on more of a trusted family member or a friend or a neighbor registering more people to vote. And as a consequence, a very positive consequence, is that if we do that, then that person can reach out to the person they registered to vote and said, hey, we registered to vote. Remember, I registered you to vote. Yeah. You're going to vote, right? You need to make sure you're going to vote. Yeah. I got my ballot. I'm going to vote. So it's the follow through, which is really important. So it's not just getting more people registered, but the follow through. And we're very excited about having that big impact. We're going to share the video, the information with all the Latino groups, all the grassroots, all the community groups. It's not just a CPL thing, it's a community thing, because we want this to really make a difference. So we're looking to have an impact on this election because it's so key, from top of the ticket all the way to the bottom, for the Latino future. We can't lose another generation because of bad politics. Excuse me, I got I'm gonna do my Marco Rubio impression here and drink some water.
Not a problem. Not a problem. I finished mine. So, in conclusion, encouraging, would you say, the Latino community, the Latino vote, the numbers are there and they're moving even more in that direction. Very, very good to be optimistic, aspirational, but the data also shows that we have lots of work to do and that we will probably not see those big impacts that we sometimes would like to see quick. It'll take some time. Is that pretty much a good assessment?
It's mostly a good assessment. The difference is that, yes, the numbers are there, and therefore the opportunity is there. At CPLC, we're going to do everything we can to make sure the follow through and the execution is there this election. We're going to be involved in this election like never before with the CPLC Action Fund and CPLC in general. We're really going to push Latinos, and we're going to make it possible because we know the change is possible, real change, lasting change. It's there for the taking. It's just a matter of connecting and making it happen. But we have to make it happen rather quickly because October 5 is the cutoff date to register to vote, to be eligible in the November election. Arizona, it's 29 days before the election you have to register. So unfortunately, what happens is many people get involved, like in October, middle of October, they start seeing all the ads and they say, you know what, I think I'm going to register to vote and be, have a part. Well, if you wait till middle of October, even early October, you're too late. You can't vote in the November election.
Right.
And then you have early balloting, of course, mail in and so forth. So we really have a really short window of opportunity to get people registered to vote before October so they can become a part of this November election. So it's almost like we should quit calling it the November election and call it the October election because that's when you start voting and that's when you need to register to vote by October 5.
Very encouraging. Lots of work to be done, right, Joseph?
Yes, sir, David. You're right. As
Joseph,
always.
Yeah, thank you so very much. I believe we've covered good information, and let's conclude the show. I want to thank you once again. It's early in the morning, and we managed to get up and prepare and do this show. We really hope that the folks that join live and who will watch the video later on find this information helpful. We will continue. ARP also is very much engaged in volunteer engagement. So once again, Joseph Garcia, Policy Director for Chicanos por la Causa. Thank you very, very much, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, David. You too.
All right. So this concludes the show. See you next week.
Arizona Hispanic Connection.